Okay, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Andy McGrory. I'm from the Health and Safety Executive. And for my sins, the work at height technical portfolio falls to me, along with a number of other things, PPE, drone policy, gas appliances, and electrified fences. So a bit of a mixed bag. In terms of work at height, I probably spend about 20% of my working year looking at ladders. It's taken up a fair bit of my time over the last 2 years, but I'm quite new to this, and it greatly predates me. I'm going to take you to where we are now, so you're going to get a whistle-stop history. Prior to the Factories Act 1961, ladders were mentioned in the Factories Act 1878. I couldn't find a reliable text from that, but the Factories Act 1961 says all ladders shall be soundly constructed and properly maintained. Soundly constructed. Not really a lot of meat on those bones. We're not sure exactly what that means, but they had to be soundly constructed. Since its inception, HSE's had an obvious interest in ladders. There's a lot of work use of ladders and a lot of accidents on ladders. You all know the statistics, but because of the number of accidents on ladders, HSE's over the years done a number of pieces of research on ladders and their stability and their construction. And in 1987, HSL published its first piece of research on the stability of ladders. Something appears to have dropped off the bottom of that slide. There was another bullet. I don't know where it's gone. But in 1993, there was an early version of EN131. And this looked at strength and design performance standards, but it didn't look at ladder stability in any way. And it wasn't generally accepted across the EU by member states. So because it wasn't generally accepted, and because the Commission's General Product Safety Directive, which believes that all equipment should be safe in all reasonably foreseeable conditions. So the Commission became involved in this, and they looked at the existing standard that was out there, and they said it's deficient. This standard does not meet the General Product Safety Directive. So they put out this mandate, of which you're probably all aware, on the safety of ladders. And in this mandate, they stressed the major causes, you can read there, are from lateral sliding at the top support and outward sliding at the lower base support. So those are the two key failure modes that contribute to accidents. But actually, a fifth of the accidents are attributable to the equipment and 80% to the actual user of the ladder. So from that, we can conclude that what the Commission was looking for was an inherently safer ladder that would then in turn reduce the number of accidents it was possible for the user to have in its misuse of the ladder. Moving on, over lunch, somebody was discussing Lawrence Clift and the Loughborough work. This was commissioned by HSE and HSL to look at the stability forces required under normal and foreseeable use of ladders. And this used predictive modelling to look at the processes that ladders are used for and the work that they're involved in and the forces that they would need to resist. So it was predictive modelling, and that revealed the 4 failure modes that we all know. So not just the 2 that were in the Commission mandate, but also it added loss of contact at the top of the ladder and flip. Now, to some extent, those failure modes might be common sense, but what this predictive modelling did was it scientifically proved that. And this work was for quite a long time considered to be state of the art. But over time and discussion, there were issues identified with research, and research is continually peer reviewed and looked at. And it was concluded that this may have actually over-egged the pudding slightly, the standards that came out of Loughborough. In 2005, the UK implemented the work height regulations to comply with the EU directive on temporary work at height, the minimum safety requirements for use of equipment for working at height. And within the schedule to that, there was a section on ladders, which has been enacted by Appendix 6 to the regulations, which covers ladders. In the time that followed, there was little movement by SEN in actually implementing the Commission's mandate. The history behind this goes back, and there was discussion, more discussion, lots more discussion, very little action. And the Commission were getting a bit annoyed by the whole issue. In 2007, HSE saw fit to involve itself in the process for a number of reasons, but a lot to do with the messages that were coming back out of the Commission. So HSE became involved in the committees to aid the development. TC93 at SEN set up a task force to look at stability, and HSL were involved in that work and helped to drive that forward. The Loughborough work fed into this, and that was where a lot of the discussion looked at the claims of the Loughborough work. But it certainly fed in to that baseline work. But there was a lot of work by the UK, Italy, Germany and France to try and move this forward. The Commission still wasn't happy. Progress was slow. They still had an unsafe product as they perceived it. So the Commission set up an expert group on ladders to work in parallel to SEN, but to keep the pressure on by knowing that the Commission could implement something if SEN didn't. So EN131 Part 1, terms, types, functional sizes. It's had a positive vote, it's there. And one of the key things is that it extends the base width of a leaning ladder, which will help with a number of those failure modes. And it was suggested from the Commission's mandate, it was hidden in the mandate, that they should explore the possibility of extending the base width of ladders. I don't think it's far beyond the wit of physics to understand that if the base is wider, the ladder is going to be more stable, having a wider base. Part 2 looks at the requirements and testing and brings in the base slip test. The greatly talked about base slip test, much debated. Looked at surfaces, glass. Was glass the same everywhere in Europe? How do you get stainless steel to be uniformly rough? I mean, this opened my eyes to how technical ladders could be. But where we are is there's a tougher test. Well, any test is better than no test, but there's a tough test, but it's repeatable. It can be repeated at various places around Europe. And it's a huge improvement on the 1993 version of the standard and the 2007 version, which failed at its final vote. So what would be the outcome? That a naked ladder is inherently safer. It has to pass standards of base slip. It has a wider base, so it's less prone to top slip and therefore flip. As I said, it's not perfect, but it's a great improvement on what we are. And if you take work use out of the equation, and BIS reckon that it's about 60% of ladder use is not work use, domestic users. And a domestic user, you can't legislate for, literally and in real life. So it's going to make it safer for the domestic user in the long term. And while I say it might not be perfect, we might not like the Commission's alternative if this standard didn't come into being, because the Commission working group, I can tell you firsthand, is still working to produce something that might be more zealous than what is in the proposed standard. So what does HSE expect going forward? Well, of manufacturers, we expect manufacturers to adopt and embrace the new standard. It's the same with any standards. If a product is safer and the standard the manufacturer is going to make a safer product, then, you know, we'd expect all manufacturers to be working to that. Particularly where it might become a harmonized standard, you know, that would certainly be an expectation. And when you're working with big clients, you know, you need to get them to embrace the standard and to develop products that are in line with the standard. It's going to be education and communication. A lot of the issues are going to be around communication. What do we expect of work users? Again, to adopt and embrace the new standard ladder. They look a bit different, but if they're safer, you know, we want people to be using them and to be advocating their use. Where people have had safe systems of work that have been in place for years, we want them to look at how they can adopt those safe systems of work to work with the new equipment. A ladder is no different to any new piece of machinery or work equipment. Your safe system of work is not set in stone. It should be regularly reviewed and changed where it needs to be. After all, a number of sectors report that they're only having accidents where the safe system of work is not followed. So they may have a whiz-bang safe system of work, but actually, if the guy on the ground doesn't follow that system of work, he's using a naked ladder. If he's using a naked ladder that's safer, then you're reducing that risk of the accident. So the EN131 ladder is an improvement in the baseline, and we expect big companies to be procuring products to the new standard. You know, we don't want to see people trying to work their way around to doing something they used to do, because that's the way they've done it for 20 years. So what's HSE's policy position? There's going to be no change to the regulations. Whilst ladders are going to be inherently safer, they're not going to be safe. And it's a question I've heard lots of times from people in this room. What is safe? With ladders, will you ever get to being 100% safe? You know, that's the utopia. And product development and movements in standards, you know, it's continual improvement. But we're not there yet. It's an improvement, but it's not all the way there. So there's going to be no change to the law. What it says about securing a ladder, that'll still be in Schedule 6, you know, and there's still going to be at the bottom of the hierarchy the low risk, short duration work and not used for planned work that's happening all the time. So ladders are going to be the same as they've always been. It's just going to be a safer ladder. And I think that, in a nutshell, is the position we've reached. And I'll take any questions, but if they're technical ones, I'll just point at Don.